Hello, hello. Today we're talking about Mr. Robot, the first two seasons of this I just finished watching, and I had some stuff to say. So, this is a show that first started airing in 2015, and when it was coming out, I don't know where I first heard about it, but me and my dad were like, yeah, this sounds good, let's try watching this. And I thought, eh, it's fine. I was kind of enjoying it, kind of starting to tune it out. I think my dad ended up watching at least the entire first season. Maybe he kept going. I don't know. I should talk to him about it. But eventually, I just totally lost interest and stopped watching it with him. There's some stuff that I found a little cringy. Like, right from the get go, they make a solid effort in showing that they're not like other series about hacking. They're not like that cheesy movie Hackers from the 80s or CSI with their superficial, nonsensical understanding of how computers work. We're going to get all the details right. And it just sort of bugged me because it felt like it was really trying to pander to me. And then when there was something that they got slightly wrong, I just like physically cringed because they seemed to be trying so hard. Like in an early episode, Eliot is trying to research some hackers and he goes on 4chan. And it's like, come on now. It's not you're not gonna find anything on 4chan. So stuff like that just kind of turned me off of the whole thing. Even though there was other aspects I was enjoying, like I was always impressed with the production of it and the performances, but just couldn't get over that. And then the real death blow was not long after I'd started watching it. I was hanging out with my cousin Brendan. Shout outs to him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I'm watching it. I'm watching it. Here, here." He puts his hood up, and he goes, "Actually, I think society is bad." He just nails. I can't do it very well, but the Rami Malek voice, he just nailed it. We were just in like hysterics. And after that, I was like, nah, I just can't do it. I can't take this show seriously. So it kept airing, it finished. I heard a lot of buzz around it. The site I used to get TV was always having like a group watching party every time there was a new episode out. It kind of came up in conversation here and there, but I was always kind of like, nah, it's not for me. And then recently, my friend Cole, shout outs Cole, who was sitting here before in some episodes of Emily in Montreal, was like, no, that show's actually like really solid. You should try watching it again. All the stuff you kind of have reservations for, I think if you get over that, you're gonna really enjoy it. And he really enticed me. This is what really lured me in. He said, "This is like the Western Evangelion." Not that it has the same status, not that it occupies like the same cultural slot, but on the actual level of the plot and characters, he said this is like Evangelion. And that got me. Because I needed to know. Even if I didn't end up thinking that was the case, I needed to know what would lead someone to say that. And I'm really glad I tried it out again because now I'm really enjoying it. It's great. It's a great, great time. And it's so much fun and so interesting that I thought I would talk about it here with you guys and make my wholehearted recommendation to check it out. Because, yeah, I feel like maybe a lot of people had the same reservations as me. Certainly my cousin Brendan kind of seemed to have the same attitude towards it as me. I don't know if he ended up watching the rest of it. And I think it kind of puts out a weird version of itself at first before you can really kind of clue into what their intents were. So first off, it's not really about hacking. Hacking is certainly a major plot element, and it's a driver of change and effect in the story. But it's sort of like the medicine in like a medical mystery drama, like something like House, where they certainly explain to you, okay, this is the disease they have or that we think they have. If we use this treatment, it'll have like a 50% chance of success. But if we're starting to see these symptoms, then oh no, that means it's something much worse. And but you don't really need to invest yourself in that inner causality. You can kind of like black box that entire explanation and just know, okay, they're trying something that should lead to good result, but maybe it will lead to bad result. That's really the only functional role it has. And there's a lot of tension around that because it's a part of the plot that we're not sure what the outcome will be. And the tension, though, isn't based on you being invested in that inner logic. It's not like you're going, oh, but that medicine was taken off the market. You don't need to understand that causality. You don't need to know, but it's like a 1 in a million shot for such and such a password to match with our rainbow table or whatever. Like, those details are there for you, and maybe you can be invested in them, but the plot isn't actually about you being invested in those details. And I was kind of tricked by this, again, just because they tried so hard to make it like accurate. And I thought that meant that they wanted you to be invested in those actual ideas and to think they were cool in and of themselves. And as I said, I kind of felt like pandered to by this, and then I felt like hypercritical of it. And I remember one scene that like really bugged me, where the characters Romeo and Mowgli are watching hackers, and they're making fun of it. And Romero has this like fourth wall breaking line where he's like, I bet some TV writer out there is working on a show that's gonna blow people's minds about the ideas of hacking. And I'm like, okay, so this show is just trying to like sell me on the idea that like hacking is cool and complex and stuff. But I think I only really thought that because I'm so close to this stuff, and because I have this like not I'm not a hacker. And I shouldn't try to like overstate my own expertise or whatever. But I'm familiar on like a term level of what everything means in the show. And I felt again, yeah, like pandered to, but it was only because I had this closeness. If I compare it to something like House doesn't expect me to care about the symptoms of lupus, or to clap and do the Leo point when I see them reference some disease that I happen to know of. It's not about that. Like, maybe some people have that enjoyment watching it. Maybe some people really enjoy watching Mr. Robot because they go, I use Linux. But, like, it's really not about that. It's just simply an element of the show's causal chain that can succeed or fail. That's the role it plays. The actual focus is still on the character interactions and of the overarching plot itself, in which hacking is just like a tool. But it's not just a tool. It's actually a little bit more than that. It provides another layer to the show. And I actually think this is one of the most brilliant writing, storytelling, world-building choices they make, is to have hacking play this kind of substrata of the plot. So basically, characters have a certain power level of hacking. The person who is more powerful at hacking can own the other person and get some info on the loser, which they can leverage to advance the plot in various ways. Now, this is, of course, simplified as to the actual plot threads, but not that much. A lot of the conflicts in the show basically break down into this person can out-hack the other one, this person gets the informational upper hand, and because of that, they're able to get their way, and the other person gets duped or whatever. But I think that's good. I actually really, really love when shows have this parallel thread of power levels, that every character has their characterizations, they have their desires, they have their relationships, but then they also have this like other kind of hidden metric, which is how good they are at hacking in this case. Or in like a sports show, it's about their ability to play the given sport. In shonen, it's just about sheer who can fight the strongestest. It creates a lot of hype. It creates a lot of expectation. And the way they use this best is often to show that a character is like really next level. That character will have somehow off-screen through mysterious ways hacked another character, had some information that was allowing them to get the upper hand, to be one step ahead, to predict their actions. But it's not showing how they did it. You're like, whoa, that person must be like a really, really good hacker because, they're able to figure out where Eliot lives, say, or they're able to intercept such and such a thing. And that's like a really visceral, plot-relevant way to show, oh, this character has more control over the situation than these others. This character is like, perhaps a very powerful antagonist or a powerful ally or whatever. I think that's really brilliant. And especially because normally with any other kind of premise, if you had to have the plot advance because a character just kind of like magically knows something, that would feel kind of ass-pulley, right? Like that would be very unsatisfying, and it might even seem like a plot hole. But here, whenever that happens, you're just like, ooh, this character's powerful. So I think that's like a very, very clever choice, and they're making really good use of it. Then you kind of get this conflation where characters have like a hacking power level, which is this sort of subversive power to gain information or gain control of things that they shouldn't be able to. And then there's also a very strong element of social power among all the characters. There's like a big theme of, your place at work, your place in politics, the amount of money you have, the amount of influence you have. And this is kind of the power that you're supposed to have, I guess, in contrast with the hacking power. And it creates this sort of 2D spectrum that all the characters fall onto. And it's like really complex to try to work out who actually has the upper hand in different situations. And I absolutely love stuff like this. Trying to see where social power and the subversive hacking power intersect, which one gets the upper hand, the insane hype that happens when you see someone and you realize that they're actually like very highly ranked on both axes. This sort of feeling of like an upset potential, that someone very high in one regard can like overpower the ability of someone. Like an example is, such and such is a brilliant hacker, but in the end, the force of the law, the social power of the law, can still just completely ruin his life. Or vice versa, someone with like a great social standing can be driven into the dirt just through like clever hacking and manipulation and stuff. Like that sort of cross toppling is so exciting. Okay, so this two-dimensional power ranking, it doesn't happen as often as it should, I think, because it's generally an indicator of a very compelling plot and a really rich universe where you're really excited to see characters interact and stuff. I think another great example is The Wire. The Wire has something very, very similar, where characters either have like the power of social standing, or they just have kind of like a ruthless street power where it's their ability to just shoot somebody, right? And I think this is honestly a big part of why The Wire is so good, is that it created all of these really compelling matchups of showing the intersection between the just straight power of violence and then the socially given power of like the police or politicians or whatever. So yeah. Also, a lot of anime has this. And a lot of my favorite sorts of anime have this. The other thing this show is not about, that I completely misunderstood the first time I tried to watch it, this show is not about Eliot being cool. When I first watched it, I really thought they were going for this angle that Eliot is kind of like Neo. He's like a super hacker. He's kind of edgy. He can just kind of do whatever he wants. He's sort of a Mary Sue because he's like infinitely gifted at hacking. And that you kind of watch it and you aspire to be like Eliot, right? And I'm just so sick of characters like this. Especially when they try to like pander them to me. You like computers. You're terminally online. You know what the heck he's talking about. Don't you want to be like Eliot? And, as soon as I perceived that to be the message, I was very turned off. But that's not the message at all. I don't think they don't mind if you find Eliot cool. Like, it's not like they're writing him deliberately to be unlikable or pathetic or, not at all aspirational in any qualities. Because, he does some cool stuff. He does these epic takedowns of pedophiles. He has this crazy double life where most of the people in his life have no idea the power he has. He has all these base anarchist views. He has a hot girlfriend who gets him drugs. He's got one of those hella sweet lives. And I don't think they're necessarily, trying to take away from that. But at the same time, this is really balanced by just having him suffer like so much. His mental illnesses, his trauma, all that stuff isn't at all enviable. And it's not superficial either. Like, it really impacts the plot. And I think for me, he ends up being like a very endearing character that It's not so much that you want to be him. It's not so much that you think he's a super cool badass. You're just kind of like, oh, Elliot. Oh, come on, buddy. I hope things get better for you. So yeah, the cool elements and even the endearing elements, though, they're not really the point of the show. Like, he's certainly the protagonist. He's certainly the largest driver of change. Most of the show is focalized through him, but it's it's more like so much of the plot causality is happening despite his character, as much as it is because of it. Like, even when he's an active element in how things proceed, it's not that he's like constantly swooping in and saving the day. His hacking power is nearly infinite. It's almost like a Deus Ex Machina in some regards. But just the brutality of the show leads it that most of the choices he makes are like regrettable or ambiguous or confusing or cause trouble in another area. So you kind of feel like he's almost like a victim of his own potential. And that the show really isn't at all just like a superhero story of Elliot the super hacker, which is, that was a great relief to find out, because this is so much more interesting than that would have been. It's about as far as you can get from Elliot has a hella sweet life and fights the system because he's so badass hacker. Yeah. So if that's your reservation, get over it. So here's some stuff I liked. This series has excellent twists. So there's a whole era of TV that I would say is like twist and tension core. And I don't really watch much of this stuff because I generally find it just really exhausting. And Mr. Robot certainly falls into that tradition. Maybe a little too much. There's so many scenes of characters gathering around, and you see their faces. But that means, and here's the, what is it? What is it? Just turn the camera. Show me what they're looking at. So many scenes, and somebody knocking on the door, and they turn. The monologue goes, zeros and ones. I knew that behind that door was either a 0 or 1. And I don't know, it gets a little tedious. It gets a little like unnecessarily drawn out, I think. But and especially since most of the time, and this is just how writing works, like you can't have a shock every single time or else the plot won't make any sense. So most of the time it turns out to just be like, oh, okay, that's what I thought it would be. But this is just how TV is written now. Like, this is just how you sell a TV show, is that before every commercial break, there's going to be the stinger of a mystery. And at the end of every episode, there's going to be the tension of, oh, they've spent the last 30 seconds looking at this thing, looking shocked. That's fine. That's fine. But it's fine because they actually use this in a way that makes the big twists just fucking hit. I think they really intentionally play with the expectation that TV is written like this, by subverting where you think the big build-ups are leading towards, and like because they have so many big build-ups, and then they have the actual like revelations, like the actual show-changing twists, just kind of dropped on you. And I think that's really clever, to use these expectations of modern TV in a way that makes the twists even more shocking. Yeah, using the typical pacing of twist and tension core. They really, really surprise you with when these big bombshells drop. And then you think back, and you think, wow, man, there was actually so many hints for that. There's so many things that make more sense now. Man, I could have called it. They've done this multiple times. I think it's very powerful if a TV show or movie or book or whatever can do this once. Have one good one, like right near the end or something, that makes you, blows your mind and makes you rethink the whole series. They've done this several times in just the 2 seasons I've seen. And I don't know, I'm just amazed. Like, that's just really good writing. To be able to pull something like this off, and to be able to build this language of expectation that they subvert to make it even more shocking. Other stuff I liked, all of the characters. I think I actually like all of the characters of the show, and this is pretty rare for me because I'm quite quick to find characters annoying and to go, okay, I get what this is for. Please move along or whatever. And the ones that I didn't like at first, there was a few characters that, when they were first introduced, I was like, okay, this is tedious. But I grew to like them. And the way they developed it, I think, is unique. Because a lot of the characters, you're given some sort of archetypal expectation for them. They're presented in stereotypical ways. And you think, oh, it's this kind of person. Okay, I get it. And maybe that leads to the initial annoyance. But then when they develop them, they make it seem natural, and in a lot of ways they just double down on your stereotypical expectations. They avoid the trap of just everyone gets this generically sympathetic backstory, which kind of just makes them, oh, they were so much more human than I thought. It turns out that even if I think it's this sort of archetype, it's so much more like 3D or whatever. Because that's actually not that interesting necessarily, to just have like a bunch of like real feasible human beings. I think it's more fun that they just let you enjoy the enjoyable archetypes, heightened and exaggerated and made more powerful as you learn more about them and how they interact with one another. This is kind of anime type character writing, but I'm here for that. I love anime. And the performances are pretty great too. I don't know, I could go on about that, but generally everybody does a great job. I think Christian Slater's my favorite. He just nails it. He's just super entertaining in every single scene he's in. Just this uncannily charming person. The social messaging in this series is actually pretty based. And I even... I got worried. I got so scared that it was going to become a lib show. I just straight up asked Cole, tell me right now, does this become in any way a lib show? Because I'm still willing to drop it at this point. And he's like, no, the message actually remains very radical, which is rare and exciting. I won't get too much into the plot, because, I don't want to spoil anything. I think you should watch this show if this is all sounding good to you. Because, I think in this kind of like modern TV show paradigm, you always want to have with like gray morality, You don't want to just have clearly delineated good guys and bad guys. You want to make every character, if not sympathetic, at least like understandable. You can at least get into their mindset of why they're doing things. So I was like, I don't know, like how sympathetic are they going to be to the capitalists? This is why I asked, But it's nicely balanced. You find the bad guys compelling. You're interested in them as characters. You almost want to see them succeed. Just so you can see the fruitions of their plans and see, how their desires manifest in their personalities and stuff. But it's still unequivocally, they are the bad guys. And that the good guys are in the right for doing what they're doing. So it's pretty good. I'm excited that they're doing something like this in an era where TV really aspired to be like right down the middle on every issue of like, well, there's good and bad guys on all sides and all of that other tedious tripe. So I keep kind of talking about, TV of this era, this type of show. Is this prestige TV? Would you put it in that genre? I would say, not really. I would say it occupies this kind of strange liminal space around prestige TV. And this kind of was a relief to me because it's kind of burnt out on prestige TV too. And this was certainly something that I thought going into it, that, this is another like prestige show. That's why I'm watching it with my dad, as we always do. But I really wasn't in the mood for something like that, especially now, returning to it. I wanted something much closer to what it actually is. So what is it? Because it does have a lot of the hallmarks of prestige TV of this era. Your twists and your tensions, the monologue-driven dialogue, which is always trying to find that perfect sweet spot between the annoyingness of Aaron Sorkin ranting on with uncanny eloquency and not really saying anything interesting, and then like the Joss Whedon, like everybody is witty and clever and you're just quipping back and forth, but it's also kind of annoying because nobody's actually saying anything interesting. They're always trying to find the sweet spot between there where things actually get interesting. They play a lot. They have a really, really cool soundtrack and OST. It absolutely kicks ass. They do a lot of like diegetic tricks where music will start playing from some diegetic source and then just become part of the soundtrack, which is always fun. They play a lot with the structure from episode to episodes. They have some crazy dream sequences and psychedelic stuff like that. There's some sort of social theming. There's some world building, tons of networking plot threads. These are all the things that if you were checking off like a prestige TV show, this is what would qualify it as prestige, I think. So in that regard, it's kind of hard not to call it prestige. At the same time, it doesn't really have the same goals, I think. Because prestige TV is usually praised for things like depth of theme, depth of character portrayal, and quality of production. And it's not like this series is lacking those things, but you can tell the focus is much more about just having a thrill ride of a plot. That the other things are just in service to make the plot very compelling, and then all of the twists and turns and tensions and stuff hit all the more because you're so invested in the characters and the themes. That it's not about, some great philosophical quandary. It makes its kind of philosophical positions quite clear and doesn't really expect you to ponder them in depth. Instead, it's just, yeah, we're here to see what the heck will happen. The show really, really compelling just on the level of I want to see what happens next. I think it's also much more willing to live in like a fantasy space than most prestige TV shows. There's a lot of like world building. They do a lot to show kind of the fallouts of the big events of the show. And in doing so, they often kind of nod to real life events. But they're never interested in making like a statement about those real life events or, trying to set up some complicated parallel or something like that. It's just sort of like a loose connection with the real world where if they want to do something like deep fake Obama's voice to talk about current plot threads, just because that's cool, hell yeah, they can do that. But if there's some aspect of the real world that they don't want to bother kind of incorporating into the plot, even if it would have some significance, were this actually happening, they're totally fine just kind of leaving that out. They have a lot of fun with this. Yeah, they're fun connections to the real world, but they're not beholden to any real world complexities, which I think is great. Yeah, it's just such a uniquely fun experience watching this. I think the closest thing in this liminal space around prestige is something like Breaking Bad. Where, again, Breaking Bad, of course, is highly praised for its themes and characters and, especially the character art of Walter White. And the production, of course, was praised to high heaven. But really, that was all in service to the really compelling aspect of Breaking Bad, which was just the plot, the twists, the turns, the sense of what will happen next. And this is high praise from me. I really, really enjoyed Breaking Bad. I don't think I've ever talked about it on the channel, but I do love that show. Here's some stuff that bugs me, since I would be remiss not to mention it. And I think having only seen half the series, I'm kind of curious, how will these complaints change positively or negatively in the seasons to come? So we talked about how it exists in this sort of liminal space around prestige TV. I think sometimes it's to its detriment, where they write with the expectation of prestige TV in sort of that mode, and then it bumps awkwardly into the reality of the show, which is that it's like this weird anime that happens to be live action. So like a great example, sometimes they feel like they got to write dialogue in a particular way because that's what people expect from a good show. Characters got to monologue hyper eloquently in their climactic moments. This is the biggest symptom of it. And sometimes, it just doesn't land. Like if the character is delivering this monologue in like a really fantastical premise, like the thrust of their speech, even though it's more about characterization and philosophy and stuff, if the impetus for their speech or the setting of it is too fantastical, I kind of like break my illusion, my suspension of disbelief. I'm just kind of like, I don't care. What are you saying? This isn't real. I don't care about your stance on this because this isn't real. And that's not bad. It's just kind of tedious, I guess, to kind of have your illusion broken and then you're just kind of waiting for them to stop talking. But it still contributes to the character. It still teaches you more about that character's perspectives and their personality and stuff. So I think it's still a good investment. I just think they should be a little more cognizant of what moments do they have this gravity to it. Shouldn't that be reserved for something maybe a little more universal, than the particulars of this plot itself? And there are good examples of this in the show too. I can think of one where like the big evil CEO is talking about why he does it, the power he ascribes to, and he does it in like a very kind of generic scene where he's just chatting to one of his employees. It's not that he's doing it in the context of the Dark Army and E Corp. He's not name dropping stuff like that in the speech. So there are good examples, but then there's other times where they do stuff like that. The character gives a dramatic speech, but starts talking about like the Dark Army, and I'm like, "There's no Dark Army. What the fuck are you talking about?" Here's another one: the conflation of caring about character and cause. I like how alliterative that is. So the main crew is really endearing to me, in part because I care so much about their causes, because I agree with what they're doing. The anti-capitalist anarchist goals of the characters, that kicks ass. That's cool to see that in a TV show. But then sometimes they create a lot of tension, and you're really expected to care and be invested about the characters themselves as just people, right? And I'm kind of like, sometimes again, my illusion is broken. And I think, okay, but if this character gets busted or killed or whatever, it only sort of indirectly impacts the actual cause, their actual plan and stuff, right? Like I have to kind of think about it in a roundabout way of, oh, maybe that would lead to them ratting on so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. Like maybe I can find some reason that this actually slows down the goals of the characters in general. So I'm like, I don't know, do I care that much? Should the characters even care that much? Whenever they're just kind of in like a self-preservation mode, it seems to sort of minimize the actual importance of the cause. And I think that makes sense a lot when it comes to writing because, the changes they're trying to make aren't real. They're not actually going to really impact the world. So it's much more easy to be empathetic to a character that you want to see happy because on a very visceral level you want to be like, you want to believe in that character's happiness. So it only makes sense that they would try to make you care about the characters more than you would care about like the cause. But it's like when I recognize that they're trying to kind of pull this off, this little like switcheroo of character and cause, I'm just kind of like, nah. Go ahead, catch him. That won't stop F society. Which, that's not really the way I'm supposed to be watching the show. So it's not really a problem I have with the show. As I said, I can totally understand why it's written that way. But I just find it interesting. And you try to do a little switcheroo. And I'm like, wait. I don't care about that guy. I just care about F society. Anyways. Okay. So that's my spoiler-free recommendation. I think it's a great show. I think it's very, very unique. It's a lot of fun. It's fun to get all caught up with the what is going to happen energy. If you like anime, I think it's basically just anime, but with like the veneer of prestige TV, which is a really cool combination. Now I'm going to get into really the main reason why I wanted to make this video right now after finishing season 2 and not when I was done the whole show. I want to speculate. I want SPECULAH. So after here is big spoilers. Do not watch the rest of this video if you don't want spoilers. Okay. So, let's break this down. Let's get goated with the sauce. Here's my big question. Will there be supernatural elements in this show? There's hints, right? There's the scene where White Rose is talking to Angela. And she's like, did you ever think that life was just this kind of magical world where if you wanted something badly enough, it would happen? And Angela is like, yeah, but then I realized that wasn't real. And White Rose is like, it depends on what you mean by real. So I started thinking, okay, will this show have just straight up supernatural elements? So they've gotten close, kind of. We'll get into this more. Okay, let's just get into this more. I don't know how I feel, though, if they would introduce supernatural elements. Like, in some way, I feel like it undermines some of the social messaging of the show. But as I said before, this already kind of takes place in like a fantastical world. This is like a fantasy revolution. And that doesn't really undermine the social aspects of the show. Like, it's not saying this is fantastical, so therefore you shouldn't want it. It's saying this is fantastical, strive and organize and struggle to achieve what you can along these lines. So does it really change that much of their supernatural elements? I think it would just be really sweet too. I'm sure they would do it in such like a jaw-dropping way in terms of like the twist where it's introduced. But I think overall they're gonna like really toe the line. Okay. So yeah. I think some little supernatural spice could hit that sweet spot of like the liminal space around prestige TV again in a really cool way. Okay, because all right, I was pretty disappointed at the end of the second season because there was so much hype around what is stage two, what is stage two. Well, it turns out they're just gonna blow up another building, and they already had a little ethical debate in season one where Eliot didn't want to blow up Steel Mountain. They came up with another way to do the same thing without blowing it up. And then this time, it's kind of like, well, Eliot wasn't around. Mr. Robot had to do everything. So they're just going to blow it up. So it's like, okay. Like, it kind of just feels like a step backwards in some ways. Or even if it is, kind of a transgression. Oh, Eliot didn't want to hurt innocent people. But now it's too late. This plan is going to hurt innocent people. How is he going to deal with that? It's like not that big a step forward because we already had the dilemma of like, and Eliot's already done a lot of stuff that hurts people. I don't know. They also had a line way back in like one of the first episodes where the initial plan is being explained to Eliot, and they go something about they're never going to be able to honor paper backups, and now paper backups are like such a big deal. Oh, we got to blow up all the paper backups, or else they're going to be able to rebuild their database. But I really felt like they already dismissed that. So it's kind of disappointing for them to be like, yeah, next we're going to get the paper backups. This is the huge stage 2. And I thought, this is where it would start overlapping with the really crazy stuff that White Rose was saying in the previous episode about what it depends on what you mean by real. And there was one of those, shots that I was complaining about where Eliot is like staring at the computer and he's like, what does this mean? You're seeing this too, right? And then it was just some blueprints. I was like, I thought at first, oh, this is a factory they're building. No, it's just another building they're blowing up. Anyways. It didn't feel like the Western Evangelion, but I guess that's still to come. So, what Cole said was that eventually, the characters start lining up pretty archetypally with their EVA counterparts, and that there's even an equivalent human instrumentality project. So I kind of thought, oh, this is what phase 2 is going to start pointing towards, but I guess not yet. And, spoilers, ahoy! This, in EVA, the human instrumentality project is this really mysterious project that's hinted to be the point of basically what everyone is doing all the time in Evangelion, or at least the powerful in the know people, was all to bring about instrumentality. But what is instrumentality? What does that look like? How do you trigger it, or whatever? So I'm expecting something similar from Mr. Robot. By the way, Cole saying that this is like Evangelion and that there's something like the instrumentality project, that's the kind of pseudo spoiler that I really love, because there's been a lot of fun parsing the show in the context of like, okay, but when does it become Western Evangelion? Like, I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily, like, I don't think spoilers always detract from your enjoyment. In some regards, they do. Like, there's certain kind of metrics of storytelling that spoilers degrade that you can't really get back. But in other ways, it just sort of, like, I don't know, it opens up new avenues of thought. So I'm very happy that he told me that, and that I can speculate in this way. So I think I figured it out. I think I know what's going to happen. My theory is that the main goal of Mr. Robot and the Dark Army and all of the powers that be is to bring about this species-wide activation of Tulpa powers. Okay. So if you don't know, a Tulpa is where you have like an imaginary friend and you spend so much time thinking about what the imaginary friend looks like and is doing and is thinking about and is saying and what their personality is, that eventually you just start like hallucinating that the imaginary friend actually exists, and that subconsciously and automatically the imaginary friend has kind of like its own parallel thought process and seems to do things independently of you. Now, tulpas, if you've heard of them before, it's probably in a mocking context. And a lot of tulpamancer type people claim that tulpas can do all sorts of supernatural stuff that doesn't make sense. Like tulpas can find things that you can't see. Tulpas have like genius abilities that you don't have, and none of that is real. But the actual tradition of tulpas and the actual like manifestation of this as a symptom of like various mental illnesses and stuff like schizophrenia, or is actually the result of like long meditative practices going back to Tibetan Buddhism, there's actually something to it. I wouldn't say it's like BS. A lot of people are very quick to say that tulpas are BS, but I'd say it's at least on the tier of BS as like a lot of other stuff in this show. And I don't feel bad about calling Mr. Robot, in Eliot's case, a tulpa. And it's basically a superpower, right? Like, it really pushes the envelope in terms of what we think a tulpa is realistically capable of. It has stuff that only he knows, that Eliot is not privy to, which has all sorts of benefits. He can tank attacks. He swaps out for Eliot so that Eliot doesn't get, hurt as badly and can still function better. He can work while Eliot rests, seemingly. It's not really clear what's going on when Mr. Robot goes and does stuff in full control and Eliot like isn't there. Like, how does that feel to Eliot? Is that restful? Is he just like blacking out time? At either rate, it seems very useful to be able to have like a separate tank that you can switch to, even if both tanks need to get filled up at some point. You completely alter Eliot's personality and disposition if it's helpful to do so. And as Eliot becomes aware of, Mr. Robot and how he functions and what he can do for him, to the extent that he's embraced this power, which, he has very strong conflicting thoughts on back and forth, this has only, like, enhanced both of their powers greater, this, like, voluntary switching and deployment and stuff. And, all of this kind of makes sense, I think. Like, I wouldn't say that this is kind of like an ass pull, the existence of Mr. Robot. He mentions before that his dad was the only person he could talk to, so you get the sense that probably in the years between his dad dying and the events of the show, he had been mentally talking to his dad quite a bit. His dad in his mind was this like original hacking authority that seemingly could do anything, was always kind of a step ahead in like social situations and stuff. And that's, of course, where Eliot betrays him, is by giving away his secret that he kind of felt he had under control or whatever. So Mr. Robot, his dad, elevated his mind to his extent when manifest as like a tulpa, would display like most of the traits we associate with Mr. Robot, like the confidence and the willingness to do whatever. And then we see again, Eliot is creating another tulpa, which starts right at the start of the series when he begins talking to us, like the viewer character. And I am expecting by the end of the show that character, that other person that Eliot's been talking to who never talks back, I'm thinking it'll be like a character gets introduced. It's not very clear where that character came from. They're just kind of like always in the scene with Eliot. And then suddenly you realize, oh, that's you. That's the viewer. I don't know. I'm less confident about that. I guess I'm not really confident about any of these plot points, but that one I haven't put as much thought into. Anyways. Okay. So, Eliot's got this tulpa. It kicks ass. It helps him, make all of these gigantic changes upon the world. Who else do we know that operates with two distinct personas? And is also obsessed with time to the extent that she would love to have a tulpa handling things in parallel, to have all these superpowers that Eliot has. And we see this bizarre scene where Angela is kind of like adopted into the Dark Army via an extensive personality test, which seems to almost manifest this like dual tulpa separate personality inside of her, maybe, because all of the scenes after that, she just acts so radically different as if she's been like brainwashed or something. I don't know. Okay. So, what does this mean? Alright, so here's my theory. The Washington plant, the White Rose is really obsessed with keeping third-party inspectors out of, keeping control over and stuff. It's producing some sort of chemical that killed Eliot and Angela's mom and dad, but also made them more susceptible to tulpamancy, being taken over by tulpas of their own creation. Thoughts? White Rose's whole involvement with the hacks is just to weaken E Corp and the American government to the extent that she can secure control of this plant and to take over the Congo. And that by doing these are like producing the various ingredients of this tulpifying goop, whatever it is, that allows you to unlock this power within yourself. Maybe also she's doing this so that E Corp doesn't immediately commercialize and stratify this new era of human existence, only allowing tulpas to be under the control of rich executives or whatever. Or maybe you get like a E Corp branded tulpa that's essentially like a store mascot that just helps you buy E Corp stuff. Maybe this is just my China good energy coming through, that I think, oh, White Rose is using the Chinese government to make sure tulpas are widespread, equally available to all. I don't know. And I'm sure when this is finally explained, there'll be a scene where White Rose goes, "The ancient Greek philosopher Plato said that humans used to have 2 heads and 4 arms and 4 legs." And I'll go, no, that's not what he meant by that. I'll mauled. But I can see it in my head, this whole scene playing out. So this plan is uncovered. The crew of hackers is really split on what to do. On the one hand, yeah, this seems like a wonderful new age of humanity, maybe. Like, think about all the things we can do, and it'll exist outside of the current stratification of capitalism, and the start of an anarchist communist revolution, blah, blah, blah. But on the other hand, isn't this just kind of like mental illness? Isn't this going to drive a lot of people insane? Maybe there's something about, oh, some people can't manifest it, and as a result of this tulpification goop spreading around the world, like End of Evangelion, they're just going to die or something. Maybe Darlene is like, yeah, I'm going to do it because I want to be brilliant like my brother. Like, I want to be special. I want to be a leader. And then, because she knows she's been exposed to this, something, she didn't die yet. It's like, yeah, I'm going to get a tulpa. Maybe Dawn, the FBI agent, maybe she switches sides because her life is a fucking mess. She can get a tulpa to help her be less pathetic. I love that character so much. It's so rare that I can relate so much to a character. Anyways. And then Mr. Robot, of course, knew this was the goal all along. And he's, of course, for it. Eliot, I think, is maybe the one that's most against it, because he's like, well, look, I have this thing, and it got so out of hand, and it didn't do at all what I wanted it to do. So this is proof positive that this is going to be like a disaster. And the big final boss, and then, everybody has a big fight, hacking fight. Can we shut down the plant before they cause the tulpa impacts? I don't know. That's my theory. Saying it out loud, it sounds absurd. But I don't know. There's like a lot of hints to this sort of thing. And the show is really good about if there's like little hints, if there's little plot threads, they don't usually go nowhere. So I don't know. We'll see. This is the main point. I wanted to make this video so I could speculate and then I could watch more. I'm gonna start season 3 tonight, maybe. I don't know. Anyways, it's my Mr. Robot video. Probably make another video after I finish the whole series, which at the unnaturally fast rate I'm watching them could be in a few weeks. I really am binging this show more than I have most, because I want to see what happens next. I'm so caught up in it. Okay, that's all. Bye-bye.